A report has been released entitled Transphobia as a Security Concern, the Dangers of Conflating Political Speech with Violent Insurrection. The report investigates how various groups are now claiming that unease about gender identity ideology is a form of terrorism. Sarah Phillimore is one of the authors of the report and she joins me now. Sarah Phillimore, hello.
Hello.
Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You've been on a few times and we're always very grateful for you to come back. This is an interesting one, isn't it? You've authored this report. Can you explain to people what the report addresses? What are the findings that you've had?
Yeah, it's a report from Fair Cop and the Women's Rights Network. So if people are interested in what I'm saying, you can go and download the full report. We got very worried because in 2021 there were no less than at least 3 reports that we found saying that transphobia should be an issue of national security. And what was interesting is all 3 of these reports did not define what trans meant and also, well, therefore couldn't define what transphobia was. It seemed to be anyone who disagreed with any element of gender identity ideology. There was one in particular from the International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation. So they're based at King's College. They're not a Tin Pot organisation. They're going to be taken seriously by MPs. And this said, anyone who thinks that Rachel Levine is being criticised is therefore transphobic and therefore is just the same as QAnon and the Proud Boys. I mean, I'm not exaggerating for comedic effect. I wish I were. So we were really concerned. So we looked at those reports and I wrote to the author of one from Northumbria University and the International Centre and just asked for their comments. I didn't get any and I forgot about it. I then discovered in May of this year, when I was invited with Harry Miller to take part in a hate crime seminar run by the university, that both Harry and I had been flagged up as posing a threat to the safety and well-being of staff and students at the university.
Simply for asking the question?
Well, my email had been quarantined. I didn't know why. I did a Freedom of Information request and found out that the request for the quarantine had come from the author of one of the reports that I queried. I mean, I'd forgotten about it. It was back in January. So I wrote to the university and said, what you've done is not lawful. If you're telling me it's lawful, please explain. If you agree it's not lawful, please apologise. Now, it's all right for me to do that because I've got, frankly, I'm fed up now.
Yes.
And I'm also, not a full-time academic. That wasn't my job, my career.
And you know the law, crucially. So.
Well, I know of the law. I'm law adjacent. I feel more comfortable with the law. I know who to ask when I don't know. I went along to that hate crime seminar because I was asked and because it was interesting. But, had I been a university lecturer just starting out, imagine what that would have done to my career. So it's not just a fanciful concern. There was a direct link from the author of this report, and I think this is relevant, and I do need to say so, although I'm very well aware of the penalties for misgendering. The author of the report from Northumbria was a man called Craig McLean. He doesn't exist now. If you try and find him, you'll find instead Anna McLean. And I know it's the same person because the same publications are listed. And that, to me, feels very relevant and something that ought to have been disclosed probably in the body of that report.
Well, this gets to the heart of this issue of how we define transphobia, doesn't it? Because many people don't believe in this notion of gender identity. They don't believe they have an innate gendered soul that might correlate or might not correlate with their physical body. But why is that? Because I don't perceive that to be transphobia. That's about a personal belief, isn't it? And yet anyone who says that they don't believe in gendered stereotypes, anyone who is, in other words, a gender-critical feminist, is automatically interpreted as hateful and transphobic. What's going on there?
I don't know. It's really, really curious. And the really worrying thing is the third of the reports that came out in 2021, one of them was submitted to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, who then issued a resolution early this year condemning the UK for its virulent hatred of LGBTQI people. And I just don't understand where this is coming from. We were then ranked with Turkey and Russia in the way that we approach gay rights.
But where is this hatred? I mean, this is the thing about this. I've interviewed all sorts of feminists on the show. None of them hate trans people. They just don't.
I wish I understood what was happening because it is I think, really frightening. As you say, simply objection on a political basis. I don't think gender identity is more important than sex.
Yes.
It is not hate for me to say so.
But that's even been called fascist, that view, which is the view that most people hold, by the way. We must live in a country full of fascists.
I mean, the obvious reason why they're doing it is because they don't have any arguments. All they have is to deem you hateful and whisper in the ears of politicians and police that you are dangerous, because that's what all these reports are saying, is that women like me are on a trajectory, an inevitable path to violence and murder. It's back to the Allport scale. You know, you start with naughty tweeting.
Yes.
That's why Harry Miller was dealt with so harshly by Humberside, because they'd been told and they believed that it was then just another couple of steps to genocide.
So you say that, it sounds funny because it's so extreme, but I've seen phrases like this used all the time. You know, feminists are erasing our existence. Feminists are supporting genocides. But, you know, this kind of thing. It's so the language is so hyperbolic.
And this is why it's frightening, because most people haven't got a clue this is happening or think it's bonkers. There is a minority of people, though, who are very willing to believe that it's happening. I mean, Mary Black gave a speech to Parliament in July last year.
She's the SNP.
Yeah,
yes.
Referencing one of these reports and saying, yes, transphobia should be treated as an issue of national security. So that's one MP. Her tweet got, I think, 13,000 likes, including such luminaries as Peter Tatchell. I mean, this is serious stuff.
But that's also strange, because I've yet to see violent threats posted online by feminists. I've seen lots by trans activists with images of guns and that kind of
Well,
thing.
as I'm waiting outside to come on, I'm sent a message by somebody. My photograph and my full address remain on a website. I've reported this to the police. They seem to be taking it seriously, but there's very little that they can do. Now, I can't think of a single gender-critical feminist man or woman who has behaved in that way. So ask yourself, what is the meaning of the word terrorist? Well, it's not difficult, is it? The clue's in the name. It's about spreading fear, because that does seem to be the only weapon. But what I don't understand is why politicians are swallowing it hook, line and sinker, why the Council of Europe has issued a report saying that England is now on a par with Turkey.
So it's not just politicians. You know, I had on my show Dr. Reverend Bernard Randall, who was a school chaplain at the Trent College in Derbyshire, and he had been made to sit in staff sessions where the staff were asked by a visiting speaker to chant the phrase "smash heteronormativity." He then gave a sermon to the pupils saying we should be able to respectfully disagree with these ideological positions, and he was reported by the school to prevent the government's anti-terrorism body, right? So now, that's such an extreme reaction, but that's coming from the school, the authorities within the school. They think that him saying, can't we have a discussion about whether we should smash heteronormativity, they think that's the same as far-right terrorism.
Well, that's exactly what happened to Fair Play for Women. I think Sue Pascoe reported them to Trevent in 2019. I don't know if anyone followed the Alison Bailey tribunal. That was being live tweeted. Ben Cooper, QC's cross-examination, was getting more and more frustrated. Do you not understand? What she's saying is she's worried about men. You can't change sex, so a trans woman remains of the male sex. And the witnesses just really didn't seem to get it. Objecting to the presence of men in single-sex spaces was seen as just unconscionable, abhorrent, bigoted, leading to violence. I mean, I can't think of any other time in history where this has happened. The satanic panic of the 80s and the 90s is kind of similar, but we didn't see the wholesale, complete capture of almost every single state organisation, politicians, police. It is fascinating. If I weren't living through it, if I didn't have probably a file at Prevent on me, I would be looking at this in a really fascinated, academic, curious way. But it's happening and it's really frightening.
I mean, I started the show talking about the need for us to have shared definitions of terms. And one of the things that I think we could restore is this definition of far-right fascism. You know, that these things are not left-wing socialist lesbians who just don't believe that they've got a gendered soul. That's not the same as an authoritarian movement calling for an ethno-state. You know?
I think one of the things I will be more careful about in future is I won't talk about gender ideology, because I can see that that is something that's used by the Christian far right. I will talk about gender identity ideology. I do accept there are obviously aims that I share with the Christian far right. I don't think any child should be subject to medical transition. I think it's wrong. But there are things which I do not share at all with the Christian far right, such as allowing gay people to love who they want and marry who they want, allowing women reproductive rights and the right to abortion.
So is that maybe the point? Because they can find slight points of agreement between gender-critical feminists and far-right evangelists in America, the slightest point, even though they disagree on 99% of other things, they then conflate it and say, because of guilt by association, it's the same.
They've picked up the ball and run with it. And what they cannot do is admit the degree of support that gender-critical feminists have, because they'll make the point time and time again, you're funded by the far right. I mean, that, as we know, is insane nonsense.
Yeah, that's just made up.
I mean, as of February, I think over £2 million have been raised for various court cases which were challenging gender identity ideology. And those were made up of donations of £10, £20 from just ordinary men and women who are as fed up and as alarmed as I am. But yet the narrative keeps on coming back. You're funded by the far right. You're part of the far right. Either you're deliberately doing this, or you're some kind of stupid puppet of the far right.
And this is, and we're running short on time, so I do want to get to this point, is that why is it that the activists are so prepared just to lie? In other words, to present a false reality. They call people far-right and fascist. They must know that they're not. They say they're funded by the far-right, but, you know, the evidence is out there. They're not. Why can't they just accept reality? Why can't they say, we have different ideas, and instead of just smearing you, we'll sit and talk about those things?
I wish I knew. I mean, this is speculation. I can only assume that if you've got a movement which is largely made up of mentally ill, entitled narcissists, then they've got away for so long with having people just accept enormous lies like, I can change sex by virtue of a bit of lippy and a pretty dress, I'm now a woman, that it's become second nature to them now.
Yeah, but even that comment there, they will say, you're saying that's what all trans people are like, and of course that's not what you're saying.
That's what the activists and their allies are like.
Yes.
And I choose my words with care. I think they are mentally ill. They are entitled.
I think anyone sending rape and death threats to people because of a disagreement must have some problems.
Well, anybody putting up my picture and my address, the home where I live with my child, because they don't like my political views, that person is not well. And this is the flavour of all the responses that we get. No one will ever engage with our arguments, which are simple and straightforward. Yes, we respect trans people. They must not be harassed or abused or sacked. But you cannot change sex. And the protected characteristic of sex has to stay and be protected by law. That's it.
Finally, do you think that the politicians and the government and the people in power will accept that this has gone too far, that we have to stop these smearing and we have to stop accepting the definitions of fantasists?
This time last year, I would have said, of course, you know, all we need are a few clear wins in the courts and sanity will be restored. But it hasn't, has it?
No.
We've had more than a few clear wins in the court. We've had win after win after win. And yet people still seem to be enmeshed in what I can only call a collective madness. So I am getting worried now. Lawfare doesn't work on people who just don't accept the existence of law or that it applies to them. But I can't think of anything else that we can do. I think we've just got to keep on keeping on.
Sarah Phillimore, thank you very much for joining me.